Okay. Once again, welcome to the Sheffield Sunday As Bill Sees It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure, so much gratitude that I'm welcoming back Liz W. all the way from Buffalo, who's come to share for around 40 minutes, after which we're open up for sharing, or you can ask Liz a question. Liz, thank you so much for coming again. And with that, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Young. Hi, guys. My name is Liz, and I am an alcoholic. I'm super excited to be here. This is one of my favorite meetings. You guys do such a wonderful job and provide such amazing content for us alcoholics to listen to. Every time I've been to this meeting or listened to this meeting on Audio America, it is always filled with the solution. And most importantly, a connection with a big old loving God that we need in our lives today to be able to keep us recovered and to build that personal, intimate relationship with Him. So thank you so much for all your service and everything that you do here. It is an absolute pleasure to be asked to speak at any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially like Sunday morning. What a great way for me over here in the States, Sunday morning, a great way to start the day. My sobriety date is January 23rd, 2013. My home group is the Soul Purpose Group. We meet on Sundays virtually on the Zoom platform at 7:30 p.m. We are a big book focused meeting. We read a passage out of the big book and then share on that reading. We keep within the solution and our basic simple instructions. And we also meet in person on Thursday nights. So if you're ever in Buffalo, New York, come on by. I do have a sponsor. She knows that she is my sponsor. I have a relationship with her today. She's been my sponsor for almost 9 years now. And she knows me inside and out and has taught me how to sponsor other women. And that's one of my biggest honors that I get to do today is I have a handful of women that I get to walk through this process and to be able to help find the freedom of being recovered from alcoholism. I also have service work with inside my home group and outside my home group. I currently serve as the PI chair for our area. And what a pleasure to be able to shout from the rooftops who we are, what we do, and what we don't do. And it's something that really gets me excited to be able to give back in another way through Alcoholics Anonymous. So let's jump into this reading. Let's jump into some of the stuff that Bill talks about. This is one of my absolute favorite articles that he has written. It is in the Grapevine. It is called The New Frontier, and it's really all about emotional sobriety. When I first came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was literally that real deal alcoholic that talks about on page 21, right? Like I remember sitting in rehab once and somebody came in and shared and they introduced themselves as a real alcoholic. And I wanted to literally punch him in the throat. I'm like, what do you mean you're a real alcoholic? You have absolutely no idea what my story is. What makes you think that you're better than me in any way? Having absolutely no idea what that meant at that time because I had not been through the basic facts of our big book. And understanding that that real alcoholic is that alcoholic who, despite all of the circumstances outside, it does not matter who they've promised, how many rehabs, how many courts, how many judges, they are always going to go back to alcohol because that is the only solution in life that they have. They have this obsession of the mind that insists that somehow, someday, that they'll be able to drink like a normal person. And once they give into that obsession and they start taking that first drink, they have this body that is different than their fellows. And it absolutely demands that I drink more and more as soon as I put it in. I have completely lost the ability of choice and control when it comes around the drink. Being brand new into AA, I had absolutely no words for any of that. I just knew that I could not stop drinking no matter what. You hook me up to the lie detector test and I promised you I'm done. This time it's going to be different. I swear. And I meant it with every ounce of my being. But yet again, on my own accord, I could not get more than 90 days of dry. And that was only because 30 of them were spent in rehab. I was that chronic relapser who was in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, who was not willing at all to admit that just maybe, what you guys were talking about with this big old loving God in your life could work for me as well. I was too arrogant and I was too stubborn because I thought that I could do it a better way. So when I first came in, it was doing the steps piecemeal. what I wanted to do, how I wanted to fellowship, how I wanted to be in AA. And I sat around these rooms for a very long time without diving into the big book and getting into our solution. I wish that I could bottle it up. I wish I could tell you exactly what all the pieces and parts finally were that got me to that desperation where I was absolutely done, that I couldn't do it anymore. I was done throwing more of me at the problem and was willing to accept help from you guys for the first time. And I sat down with a sponsor when we read through this book line by line, and we took the actions that it said, and we said the prayers that it did, and things started to change. Things started to morph, where I suddenly started to be able to understand my disease of alcoholism and that it wasn't just a lack of willpower. It wasn't that I was just mentally crazy and insane. I was around that first drink, but it wasn't that I was weak-willed. It was that I had an absolute mental obsession and a physical allergy that could only be succumbed by a relationship with a big old loving God. And that was tough for me at first because I grew up where there was no such thing as religion, there was no such thing as spirituality, there was no such thing as depending on anybody other than yourself. But when my sponsor proposed it to me, do you now believe, or are you willing to believe? I had to concede that I was absolutely willing to believe that there was something bigger than me. And then I was on my way. I was on my way, and I had this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience with going through the steps for the very first time. Right? It talks about in our book on page 27 what the spiritual experience was, right? And it can, we can have this in all sorts of different ways. Mine was the educational variety. I was a little slow going, but it was little drips and pieces of things here and there that I could not deny any longer that God was working in my life. I did not have that big white light experience that Bill had and so many other people had, but I was relieved when I was read the spiritual experience in the back of the book, and it talked directly to me in regards to little by slowly. Other people would be able to recognize it even before I was. And that's what happened to me. On page 27 in our book, it talks about that we have these spiritual experiences, that these occurrences to Dr. Young were phenomenon, that they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of our lives are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate us. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were once the guiding force of my life completely set aside, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives began to dominate me. The way that I thought, the way that I felt, the way that I projected was changed. I was not the same person that I was when I first came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that continued to grow and deepen as long as I did a few simple things. And those few simple things are absolutely 10 and 11 and 12, which are my jam. Are you kidding me? Right? And here's the thing that happens. Is we go through the steps and we have the spiritual awakening, and these ideas, emotions, and attitudes that guide us are changed. And I'm starting to love on my fellows, and I'm starting to see things clear for the first time. And I may be even starting to live life on life's terms and not on mine anymore. But if I am not growing in understanding and effectiveness, like my 10th step tells me, right? Growing in understanding and effectiveness of what? Understanding of God's will for me and effectiveness of how to carry that out. Those are my marching orders today. And if I am not living in that on a daily basis, guess what starts to happen? More and more of me becomes dominant. That ego starts coming back, that pride, that like the humility is gone. All of those character defects that I first started finding out about myself that were driven by me, right? That I begged God to remove from me in 6 and 7 start to bubble up to the surface again. I am not growing in understanding and effectiveness. How do I do that? And what does it look like for me when I'm not? What it looks like for me is exactly what we read in that article on page 63 and as Bill sees it. I start getting consumed with my little plans and designs. Why am I not getting this? What does he think about me? Why are they saying this about me? Don't they understand who I am? I've come so far and I've changed so much. Everybody should be understanding that I demand my life back. My mind starts racing 100 miles per hour with everything that I did in my third step, right? All of those scripts that I start writing. That's what my third step talks about, right? I am this amazing director. I know exactly the parts that everybody should play. And I write a script for you, and I write a script for you, and I know exactly how you should act, and you should act, and you should act. And the problem is you're gosh darn all script violators. And when I don't get my way or think that things need to come off the way that I want them to, I get resentful. And then I start being frozen and paralyzed in fear. And I start acting out in the same way that I did in early sobriety. I don't know about you guys, but there's like something weird that happens like when you're 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 sober. First of all, I start beating everybody over the head with my big book, right? Because I have the answer and you need to do it the way that I think that you need to do it. I know everything that there is and you need to follow my directions and here, listen to me. Oh, goodness, those terrible truths, right? I think I got this and you need to do it the way. Okay, chill out. But that's me exerting my own will. And I start getting like full of myself. And the solution always comes back to, where is my prayer and meditation? What am I doing to grow with God? And I really have to start looking at that step 10. It probably wasn't until I was about 3 years sober, maybe 4, if I'm being totally honest, that I realized 10 and 11 weren't like bonus steps, right? Like you didn't get extra credit for doing those, right? Like they weren't like the extra, okay, if I want to, maybe sometimes here and there, every once in a while. Why would I not give any of the steps that are outlined in our big book that were so divinely written and have saved my life the same attention that I've given to another? Could you imagine like being like, maybe I'll do a 4 step. Yeah, that second step, yeah, it sounds kind of cool. Like it doesn't work that way. So why do I think 10 and 11 are extra credit around here? My life is dependent on growing and seeking and growing that spiritual connection. My friend Ali says, and I love this, and I'm sorry that I steal it from him all the time, but it is like so powerful in my life, right? Like when he said it, my jaw dropped because at first I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not God that keeps us sober. It's not God that keeps us sober. It's my relationship with God that keeps me sober. It is that relationship that I build through with doing 10 and 11 on a regular basis that keeps me in the middle of that sunlight of the spirit. And here's the thing that I know to be true. In our third step promises, it says, we have a new employer, being all powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. To me, that means my marching orders again is to be able to go out there and shout from the rooftops how God has been able to relieve me of my alcoholism, and that I have a big loving God in my life, and it's more important for me to love on you than to care about what my needs, wants, and desires are. There's this crazy thing that happens in like the economy of God's world, right? I have all of these things that like I want in life, that I think that I need, that I think that I deserve, that I'm aiming towards that perfection instead of God's perfection, right? Like, I want the best job. I need to be recognized at work. Everybody needs to know that I'm doing wonderful. I need to be the best speaker in AA, and you need to like bow down and think that I have so much cool stuff to say, right? Like, I need to be doing, I need to have the best hair, I need to have the best makeup, I need, like, I have these insane thoughts of all of these things that are important. And if I am focusing on that, I am not focusing on those marching orders from God, and that is to go out and love on his kids. I cannot be consumed with myself if I'm thinking about you. And step 10 makes that incredibly clear when it gives me these certain instructions that I need to do when these things crop up, because they do. The resentment, the fear, the vain, the pride, the ego, the insecurities, the dishonesty, add anything in there when they crop up. And I'm given some very basic instructions of the things that I need to do when they do. And if I am walking around being awake to this, being aware of my step 10, a friend of mine here in Buffalo calls it her walking around step, right? Like, it's the step that she carries all day long, like a purse or like a cell phone. And people get convoluted about what 10 is and what 11 is. People think 10 is a nightly inventory. And the reality is it's not. We continue to take personal inventory as we go about our day and clean up our past, right? And the personal inventory that we take is walking around all day long, being awake to what's going on in me. Right? 10, like, here's what I tell my girls, right? Like, 10 is 0, 1, 0, 0, all time, all day long, constantly, never ending. I have to be awake, watching for these things. And if I'm awake, watching for these things, it tells me I need to do at once, go to God and ask him to remove it. Right? You get that thing stuck in your craw, right? I can be on a conference call at work and be like, oh my God, this girl is driving me nuts. What am I to do about it? I want to rebuttal back and tell her my ideas and this and that and the other thing. Oh, wait, God, here I go again, asserting my will. Help remove this from me. And if it stays stuck in my craw for any length of time and it's not gone like that, sometimes I got to go to God a couple of times. Here we go. It's happening. Please, God, help me remove this. And if it's still there, guess what I get to do? I get to reach out to another alcoholic and say, okay, I'm going crazy right now. This is the situation. Let me see the truth in it, because I don't have the ability to do a solitary self-appraisal and see my delusion for myself, right? It's exactly what we did in the 5th step. I am not able to see completely everything in my 4th column of how I've harmed people or my delusions or what I live in. I need somebody else to shine that flashlight onto me into those nooks and crannies and be like, Liz, you're being selfish right now. Liz, you're being filled with fear and driven by it because you want what you want when you want it. Oh, yeah, you're right. That is what I'm doing. But I have to be humble enough to know that I can't see this stuff by myself. And if I'm spiraling, God, thank God for my 10-step buddies. These are people in my life who have spiritual consent to call me out on my BS. I need that. And the cool thing is that if I did get snippy with this girl on this conference call, I have the ability to call her back up and be like, you know what? I am so sorry. That was not kind of me. That was not right of me. I apologize for cutting you off. I appreciate your input in this meeting and thank you so much. How can I do better next time? If I've pissed somebody off, I have the ability to make it right away. And here's the kicker. And here's the thing that we kind of forget about. And here's the thing that I think that is so prevalent, especially when it comes to what we read, right? In regards to emotional sobriety, in regards to me getting so stuck in my head about the things that I want and the needs and the desires that I have, that prestige. The last thing that the 10th step tells me to do is to turn my thoughts to somebody I can be of service of. And spoiler alert, It doesn't tell me that I have to do it right that second. Go out and help somebody or be of service to somebody. And two, it doesn't tell me it has to be somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous. My marching orders are to love on God's kids. It doesn't mean just the members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I get to turn my attention to somebody I could be of service of. You know what? I haven't called my sister in a week. I really should reach out to her and see how she's doing in that new apartment. I can't be thinking about me if I'm thinking about you. When I'm in 11 and I'm doing what my 11th step is teaching me to do, right? And again, what I tell my girls, 11 is 1 and 1. It's the bookends. 10, I do things all throughout the day. 11 is my bookends. In the morning, I get quiet with God. I ask him to direct my thinking. And here's the thing. I've gone through so many different meditation practices. It's not even funny. I have tried everything. I've also been one of those people and say, oh, you know what? I can't meditate. That's not. Again, spoil in the beginning of my, like when I first got sober, I thought it was, the bonus points. I thought it was recreational. I thought, I didn't realize how important it was to be able to sit down every morning and start my day talking to God and talking about what my plans for the day ahead were. And I do it and I write it down on a notepad, right? Like, okay, I have this meeting at 10 o'clock. That girl's going to be in it again. God, I'm really going to need your help, right? I have a couple sponsee calls. I'm going to this meeting tonight. I'm sharing it. I plan my day ahead and think about the things that I need to do. And then I get quiet and some prayers. And here is if you're brand new or if you're newly new or if you haven't really started an 11-step practice, here's some great news. In the middle of page, I think it's 87, 88, it talks about, right after we do our morning prayers in those 3 paragraphs, it says, we conclude this period of meditation. Wait, what period of meditation? The 3 paragraphs that I just talked about, that we were turning our will to God in the morning. That's all you need to do to begin. And when I do not start my day with talking to God and asking him to direct my thinking throughout the day, all throughout the day, it's a little rough. And at night, when I retire, I can go through my day and look at that inventory and see where I've been at harm, see where I've been resentful, see where I've been full of fear. Where do I need more help for tomorrow? And it wouldn't be truthful if I told you that I wrote it out every single night. I don't, not every single night. There's been times when I have been meticulous and I almost check the boxes and it has to look like this and it has to look like that. I don't feel spirit when I do that. I can find myself getting so wrapped up in the mechanics that I am losing the connection with that big old loving God. I know what works for me today, and I know what works with my sponsor, and I know what works with my girls. And there's probably 5 nights out of 7 that I'm writing it down. But here's the other kicker. If I'm living in 10, if I'm walking around all throughout the day being awake to what's going on, there's not a lot to review in my 11th because I've taken care of it all throughout the day. These are the things that keep me sane, right? You get to a point when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous and you're living life on your own will and you're throwing yourself more and more to every situation because that's the only thing that you've ever known in life. And then you start to have the spiritual awakening where thoughts, ideas, and emotions that were once the guiding force of your life are suddenly cast to one side and you're a completely new person. Your personality has changed. You've had a personality change as a result of the 12 steps. And you start living in this and you're growing this big relationship with a big old loving God and you're starting to talk to him more and more and more and more. And things start getting easy and the pain starts going away and you start tasting the freedom and the serenity and you're working with other people and you're shouting it from the rooftops. And then you're living life on life's terms again. And living life on life's terms for me looks like, I want this, I need this, I deserve this. Don't you know who I am? The ego starts reemerging because I'm letting other things in front of my relationship with God. I'm letting outside clamors, outside worldly clamors start to get the best of me. It's only when I start living life on God's terms, not on mine, not on life's, but life on God's terms, does it start to get quiet again. I know that I am connected and I'm spiritually fit, and the anxiety and the depression and the worldly clamors are at bay, is when I'm talking in my mind to God and not to myself. I have this little voice that sounds so much like me that I want to believe all of the time, that can go crazy in my own brain. That negative self-talk that is out to absolutely destroy me. You're not good enough. You're not worth it. You're going to mess up again. They're all going to think that you're an idiot. They're not going to believe you. They're not going to want you. They don't want to be friends with you. They think that you're loud and obnoxious and on 11 all the time. This voice inside of my head that can go on and on and on and make me believe it's truth because it sounds exactly like me, despite the evidence I have for all the contrary, despite the experience that I've had that shows you love me and I do this and I'm not an idiot. The only way that I know that I'm on the spiritual path and I am connected to that big old loving God and building that intimate personal relationship that keeps me sober and sane is when I switch off the voice talking to me, about you, about me, about them, about this, and I start talking to God in my head all of the time. I hate when I use this analogy, but I use it because it's the only thing that makes sense, right? Like, did you ever have an imaginary friend when you were little? Right? It's that imaginary friend in my head all of the time. My first conception of a higher power literally read like a 5-year-old wrote it, right? Like it was the best that I could do at the time. That like it was a big old teddy bear up in the sky that was all loving and super cuddly and held a flashlight to show me exactly where I needed to go. That was complete and total love and eager to forgive me. Like it was like this conception of a 5-year-old, right? Thank God it's grown and built. And I know that that's not what it looks like today. But I also know that if I am talking to that conception, if I am talking to that higher power, if I'm talking to the God of my own understanding, has proven to me over and over and over again that he's got my back every single time, that he knows the right way, that when I rely on him constantly, the worldly clamors of the things that I want, need, desire, and demand are stepped aside because, again, in my third step prayer, my third step promise, keep him close, perform his work well, and he takes care of all of my needs. If I'm connected to that higher power, the worldly clamor in my own head gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And some of that stuff in the St. Francis starts to become so super easy for me because in God's economy, that's what works. If I'm seeking to love you instead of seeking to be loved, if I'm looking to comfort you instead of being comforted, if I'm looking to understand you instead of being understood, this magical thing happened in God's economy where things that I never even thought were possible start coming into fruition. And it's only because of that intimate personal relationship with him that I grow regularly in 10 and 11. If I am not doing those things, if I am not aware of that, if I am not practicing those principles, I am consumed with me and everything is bright and shiny on the outside. Don't get me wrong, guys. I have an amazing facade. I am still that actor that's talked about in step 3. I can turn it on like that. I don't know if you can tell I'm a little animated. I was a theater major, right? Like this whole actor and director analogy, like I get it, right? Totally. And I have all of these different facades that I can turn on like that where I'm not connected, where it really looks that I'm doing this thing, but I get to a point where I'm in such excruciating pain that I don't have a choice. This past year has been probably one of the hardest years that I've gone through in sobriety. The two things that were on my fear inventory my whole time in sobriety, like that are at the top of my list, my father passing, who was my original higher power, if you will. And if you're not an animal lover, you might not understand this, but my dog passing, who is my daughter, I've had her for 12 and a half years, she's my sober dog, right? Like both of these things happened in this past year. And it shook me in a way that I've never been shook before, that I didn't know what sadness truly was. I am so grateful for those that have come before me, that have implemented the foundation of the 12 steps in the spiritual relationship. And those that I've been able to go and reach out to and have gone through the same things that I'm going through and have been able to lead me through this path with grace and dignity, and allowed me the grace to be in my feelings when I needed to, but said, okay, Liz, what are you doing to still help the sick and suffering alcoholic? How are you out there still carrying this message? What are you doing? Because the more that you're doing that, the less you're thinking about you. I've been able to walk through this with grace and dignity. And here's the thing that I know to be true today. I know what my purpose is on this world. I know what my purpose. God said, you know what, Liz, with your obnoxious attitude and your level 11, I'm going to make you a drunk that is going to almost die of alcoholism, liver transplant list, yellow eyes, hospital, ascites, you name it, 6 weeks, goner. I'm going to make you a drunk. I'm going to give you a hard time to recover and to get this thing. But when you get it, I'm going to give you the ability to shout it from the rooftops that this is what saved your life, and giving you a purpose in this world to go out there and help others. We need to be in the trenches today. We need to be out there carrying the message and the solution that is so beautifully outlined in our steps. No offense, guys, but we need strong women in Alcoholics Anonymous to be out there sponsoring. We can't have one person sponsoring 12. We need to be able to ensure that that legacy is going on. And because of those strong women in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been able to walk through this past year. And I know today that these things that have gone on, and the feelings and the emotions and the attitudes that I've had around it, are going to allow me to be able to help another through this one day too. And that's what kept me going. Next Saturday will be a year since my papa passed. And I've come a long way from that, only because of the work that I have put in, and to realize that I can't sit there and be in that victim role and speak victimese. Rely on that big old loving God and build that relationship through 10 and 11. Whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's envy of riches of others, these are the tools that we have today to be able to walk through it. One of the things that says later on in that reading that we read from page 63, A New Frontier, it says, Bill writes, this seems to be the primary healing circuit. An outgoing love of God's creation and his people, by means of which we avail ourselves of his love for us. It is most clear that the current can't flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken, and broken at depth. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. And that is my truth today, that current flows freely, because I know what God's love for me is, and I know that I love each and every one of you. So thank you so much, very much, for my life, and thank you for having me here today.